In today's episode, what is an emotionally immature person? Hi there, I'm Eileen Thompson, founder of Treasured Ministries. Welcome to our podcast and YouTube channel where we talk about conquering codependency God's way. You know, for years, I was unaware of my codependency struggle because it flew right under the radar of my confused Christianity and controlling tendencies to find love. But when God brought an awareness and an unraveling of codependency that would open my arms to real intimacy with Him, everything changed. Now, I'm not a psychologist or a therapist. Don't expect an expert on this channel. I don't even have a seminary degree. But I am a woman that found freedom from codependency through God dependency. And now I'm passionate about sharing this with others. So join me as we discover truth, experience freedom, and live treasured. Hi there. Today I want to talk to you about a brand new topic called the emotionally immature person. Now, I know you know what emotional means. I know you know what immature means, but have you heard about the emotionally immature person? Well, it's an important topic for us to bring awareness to, particularly if you struggle with codependency or idolatry of man. It's important for you to have discernment in this so that you can live and give to others as God intended. And so today we're going to start a 3-part podcast series on what an emotionally immature person is and how this impacts you and what you can do about it inside of your life. And to bring awareness to this topic, I've asked for an expert to come and to be on our program today. Dr. Holly Spots is with us. She is a clinical psychologist who specializes in women's mental health. She is the owner and founder of Full Cup Wellness, an entirely virtual private practice serving women in California, Mississippi, and Florida. She specializes in therapy for women who are overfunctioning, anxious, and people-pleasing. She helps them discover their authentic self and create deeply fulfilling lives that they love. Holly, welcome to our podcast and YouTube channel. We're so glad to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and dive in. And by the way, the emotionally immature person, I found out about this because Holly is the one that told me about it. I had never heard about it before. All right, so let's go ahead and dive into this topic. Today we're going to be talking about what is an emotionally immature person, how to identify them, and why this awareness matters. So, Holly, what is an emotionally immature person?
Yeah, thank you so much, Aileen. So maybe first let's talk about why this matters. I think understanding this for myself, what an emotionally immature person was truly life-changing. I think I was, even after years of therapy, kind of blocked as to being able to be fully self-compassionate, being able to really be my authentic self. And learning about this has just been a game changer for me. So I just want to share this with your listeners. And I really feel that any woman who has felt lost, alone, confused, anyone who has believed they are unlovable or uninteresting, which was certainly me, unworthy, or just not important, I think that they will find some value in this. This is the kind of thinking that that leads to dysfunctional patterns, leads to anxiety, leads to depression, codependency, one hurtful relationship after another. Unfortunately, that trauma repeats itself. And so in order to truly heal, we have to come to understand how the emotionally immature person has affected us, not just persons. And so this comes from, well, most of what I'm going to talk about today was coined. The term emotionally immature person was coined by Dr. Lindsay Gibson. And she is a psychologist. She's been in practice for probably, I don't know, 40 years. She has several books on adult children of emotionally immature parents. And so I highly, highly recommend her books. And so I wanted to, of course, give her that credit. But learning about this from her has just been fascinating for me. And I just want more and more and more. So let me tell you a little bit about an emotionally immature person.
Okay, let's do this.
Okay, so an emotionally immature person, the most common symptom that Dr. Gibson has found in her research and experience is lack of empathy.
Okay.
So, as you know, we see that a lot in narcissistic individuals. Preoccupation with self, inability to self-reflect, to look at themselves and go, what was my part in that? They are externalizers. So an externalizer is someone who looks around them to determine who's at blame or where the fault is. An internalizer is someone that looks within. And so they are generally externalizers. They are highly uncomfortable with emotion. So what's interesting is that they are quite emotional themselves. So, but their emotions are very reactive, often angry, impulsive. They don't show the vulnerable emotions, and they are extremely uncomfortable with your emotions. So they think in very black and white terms. It's like all or nothing. Like, if you don't do this for me, you don't love me. So things are kind of categorical for them. It's very rigid. Their thinking is very simplistic. So they like to narrow reality down.
Okay.
Probably so that it's not so scary. But it seems like they have a very one-track mind. They just can't think. They can't sit and have a conversation and listen to a completely different point of view without putting it down. Okay. Their reality is what they feel it to be. This is a big one. So there's a lot of distortion of reality. They deny, they dismiss reality. If it doesn't work for them, then it's not true. It's not that way. Your reality, if it's different from mine, mine's right.
Okay.
So they're very defensive, very critical of anything unfamiliar. They're rejecting of different points of view, dismissive, very mistrusting of others, and any kind of complex concept is threatening for them. So they're living with all of this all the time, and it's a lot. It's very difficult, and so they're on edge a lot of the time, and they are trying to cope. And so the ways that they cope are often through emotional coercion of others, blame, basically finding a way to be the most important person in the room and to have zero responsibility. so that they will never have to experience guilt or shame, because that's the most difficult emotion for them. So what they do is they deflect it onto
Okay.
everybody else.
Okay. Right.
So a lot of indirect communication, you kind of have to figure out what they want. They're not going to come to you and say, what I really need is, no, you just should know. You're just supposed to know. So people tend to kind of orbit around them, kind of walk on eggshells near them, because you're never really sure what's going to set them off, what they're going to get upset about. Because when they get upset, they have no idea how to manage their emotions. And so the people around them tend to manage them for them. So they change the subject. They won't talk about certain things with this person. So they're pretty rigid. They really struggle with boundaries. I know you talk a lot about boundaries. They feel like boundaries are intrusive to them.
So
So
they
do
they feel like they struggle with setting boundaries, or they struggle with respecting boundaries?
Respecting.
Okay. Gotcha.
So someone else setting a boundary feels like they don't love me. So if you tell me that you don't want me to, for example, like, say a woman is about to deliver her baby, and she tells her mother, I love you, but I really would like you not to be in the delivery room. It would be best if I could just be with my husband. Okay, that's a boundary. That is going to feel extremely threatening, and it's going to feel like they are completely unloved by this person. And an emotionally immature person bases their reality on what they feel. So if I feel you don't love me, then you don't love me.
Okay.
So that's the struggle. They're very difficult to get along with, as you can see. They don't apologize for things. And yeah, there's
they
a
sound
lot.
like a lot of fun to be around.
Say more.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're difficult. They're difficult people.
Right. So as you're describing this, kind of my novice newbie gut reaction is, Holly, isn't this a narcissist? So is there a difference between a narcissist and an emotionally immature person? And I know that you psychologists are just like having a field day with people like me, like, quit throwing around the term narcissist, because it's, you know what I mean? Like, but it's so educate us on the differences.
Okay. So think of emotionally immature person as an umbrella term.
Okay.
So, and think of emotional maturity as a spectrum. So someone could be slightly emotionally immature or highly emotionally immature.
Okay.
And so things like narcissistic personality disorder or borderline personality disorder, that's another one that gets thrown around a lot. They all fall underneath the emotionally immature person. So people with personality disorders are all EIPs. That's what we call them, emotionally immature people, EIPs.
Okay.
So people with personality disorders are all EIPs, but not all EIPs have a personality disorder.
Gotcha.
And so we have to remember that a personality disorder is a technical diagnosis. It has to come from a professional. It has to be made using the DSM-5. It's not something that we can technically make of another person. So, unless we're in that role. And so what
Eileen, right? Eileen. Yeah.
No, I get it. I mean, when you see something and it is, but that's the technical side of it. And so what happens is, while sometimes a diagnosis can be really helpful, when like a client's in therapy and they're thinking, their therapist says, it sounds like your partner has some real narcissistic traits. Let's look into that. That could be really helpful. But what happens is that the word narcissist has become overused.
Right.
And so, people learn about narcissism on TikTok or Instagram, and they're like, oh, everyone's a narcissist. They start calling people narcissists.
Right.
And then the other problem is underuse. So for a lot of people, it is really hard. It feels like a real betrayal to label a loved one as a narcissist. That they might have some traits, but the diagnosis may not completely fit. Right. And so, not everyone is a narcissist. Not everything is emotional abuse. So getting caught up in whether someone is a narcissist or not can really kind of halt the healing. So emotional immaturity is this umbrella spectrum, which includes that, but broadens the definition. It feels more fair. It helps people take the information in. And I think it's just more balanced because the EIP isn't all bad all the time.
Gotcha.
One of the biggest blocks for people who grew up feeling emotionally lonely in their homes and when they were raised by EIPs is that they felt well cared for in non-emotional areas. Maybe their basic needs were met. Their parents made sacrifices. Maybe their parents even immigrated to this country with the coat on their back. They may have received multiple gifts from their parents. So this was all evidence of their love, which is very confusing. Am I selfish for wanting more from them?
Right.
Am I selfish for wanting a connection with them? Right. And that's the thing. The EIP can be highly intelligent, extremely smart, accomplished, driven, highly functional. They can be fun, charismatic. They can even be a favorite parent. And so we have to be careful to not push people away with a real diagnosis of like narcissism or borderline personality disorder. And so that's kind of the thinking behind this. If we can present a non-technical term, but just a grouping of characteristics, more people can take it in and they can make meaning out of it without feeling like they're betraying someone.
It probably relieves a lot of people because if you're walking on eggshells, then you're feeling like this is all your fault. And then you learn, oh, that person couldn't connect with me emotionally.
Yes.
There's nothing wrong with me. And that you can kind of let go of that shame or that question mark that you've had all your life, like, am I worth loving? Because then you say, oh, that's why this happened. Just like a person who cannot see because they're blind, then you wouldn't say, why couldn't they see? Why couldn't they see? Then you're like, oh, well, that's why they couldn't see. So, So, okay, I love this. So,
and it helps. I think we can have a little empathy for them, but also, I think it's just more fair technically. And I think that, people seem to grab onto this and make progress a whole lot more quickly. There is some grief that has to be processed when they identify that their parent will never be able to be that emotionally connected parent that they need.
Right.
And that's something that has to be processed and worked through.
Right. But also some freedom too. So you're not, your expectations are changed and then you can love them, where they are. But let's talk about this. So you talked about this a little bit, like the walking around on eggshells. What is it like to be around an emotionally immature person?
Okay. So imagine what it's like being with a 4-year-old. Okay. They are, a lot of fun, usually silly. Okay. But they're egocentric. They are self-focused. Their emotions are big and out of control sometimes. they don't want to get in trouble. So they are defensive and blaming of others.
Mm-hmm.
He did it. I didn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
They sometimes lie or distort reality,
Mm-hmm.
deny reality. I wasn't there. I didn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
They also need others to mirror them and help them settle down. So,
What does that
um,
mean? Mirroring.
so mirroring. So this is emotional attunement. So when a child is, let's say sad, it would be a natural instinct for a parent to come and go, "Oh, you're sad. Oh, that makes me feel sad too.
Mm-hmm.
What? Tell me about your sadness."
Mm-hmm.
Um, so this is normal for a 4-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
This is what 4-year-olds need. We're
Mm-hmm.
supposed to mirror them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but the emotionally immature person is a 40-year-old,
Mm-hmm.
and it's too much to expect another adult to be with them, mirroring them, managing their emotions all the time.
Right. Right.
So, that's kind of a sense of what it's like to
Mm-hmm.
be with them.
Mm-hmm.
The one of the things that Dr. Gibson says is that the most common feeling that people describe after interacting with an EIP is tired.
Mm-hmm.
They're exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
There can also be anger, frustration. And then the most common symptom of an adult child of an EIP is emotional loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't feel connected. And that extends to their life in general. They generally feel emotionally lonely. So the EIP is a poor listener. They dominate conversations.
Mm-hmm.
They dismiss your opinions, the way you see things. They are the authority.
Mm-hmm.
So if you share a difference of opinion, they're gonna tell you you're wrong.
Right.
Um,
Right.
they have very little interest or empathy in others.
Mm-hmm.
They don't seem to have a filter. Sometimes you'll just go like, did they really just say that?
Right.
Like people look at each other across the room, like, do they not see that that's inappropriate to say?
Right. Right.
Um, they can be real killjoys, like
Mm-hmm.
sarcastic,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
cynicism, mockery, contempt. You just can't be yourself around them.
Right. Right.
There's and then the last thing is they highly value roles. So
Okay.
they use roles, like roles in the family
Mm-hmm.
or in any system,
Mm-hmm.
for authority.
Like you should
So
do this because
uh-huh.
I'm on the elder board at church. And
Yes.
if you've been listening to Treasure Ministry stuff, that doesn't fly here.
Yes.
Like,
Like,
yeah.
I
Uh-huh.
am your mother. You will
Uh-huh.
obey me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I even have adult clients who are in their 30s,
Mm-hmm.
40s, who tell me that their mothers still tell them, you are
Mm-hmm.
supposed to obey me. I am your mother.
Mm-hmm.
And so that can be really confusing
Mm-hmm.
if used inappropriately, because
Right.
people think, oh, well, the Bible says, obey your mother and father.
Right.
Well, we have to look at that a little bit more
Deeper,
closely. And
yeah. And
yes.
what we always teach in Treasure Ministries is that, certainly when children are little, yes, because your parent is
Mm-hmm.
taking care of them, but that the Bible says that a man shall leave his father and mother,
Mm-hmm.
and then God always has to be first. And if
Mm-hmm.
somebody is using a title to manipulate you, to put, you must obey me first, that is very clear, like red flag.
Mm-hmm.
One of the free will is so important. My boys now are 21, and 23. And it's not easy to let go, like you don't call the shots anymore, but boy, it's God's will. It is
Yeah.
God's will for parents to let go and let their children make their own choices. We had a time when they were in car seats to control everything. That time is over, because they need to follow God. And and that might look different than what you want. Might look different, but it's okay.
And so people have to learn, how do I handle that? My adult mother is telling me what to do, and she sounds so certain about what it is that I'm supposed to do. They have to learn to say, okay, well, that's a good idea, Mom, but it's important for me to think this through for myself.
Yeah. And even Jesus did that. I mean, he said, you're in Mark chapter 3, your family's looking for you. And he said, my family are those that do the will of the Father. And so even Jesus, did not jump. Who he served first was God. And so that to me is the big difference. And God, gives us free will. And so I don't think, in my opinion, I think God frowns deeply when people use titles to demand that you go to their whims. So, so that's a good biblical way of looking at it, that we don't want to be yoked to anybody where we're doing everything that they say, because then we don't have freedom to choose God first. So let's talk about the converse of this. So we've talked about emotionally immature, EIP. What about a emotionally mature person?
Yeah. So obviously it's very, very different. And the problem is, for most people, maybe not for most people, but for a lot of people, they have never experienced this. And so it is foreign. And so of course it is up to us to seek it out and learn, what should it look like? What happens is people who come out of emotionally immature homes think that's normal, and it's not. That's not healthy. It's not normal. So, okay. So a mature person, has their own interests and is also interested and curious about others. So I get to be me, you get to be you, and I will show interest in you. And it's nice when you show interest in me too. So the relationship feels, you feel very seen and important in this relationship, but you are not, you have your own sense of separateness in this relationship. Emotionally, a mature person, so they can emotionally attune. Like I was talking about the mirroring. They can be, excited for your successes. You come home and you're like, oh, I had a great day. They can smile at you and be like, oh, that's awesome. Or, you've had a tough day, and they can read you. They know to go and give you a hug. They know, they can see it in your eyes. So there's this mutual mirroring of emotion that is healthy. They take turns in conversation. So you don't feel like they're dominating. They own their own mistakes. They apologize. They make amends. A majority of my clients will say they grew up in homes where arguments were never repaired.
Yeah.
Nobody ever came back and said, I'm sorry.
Right.
I shouldn't have said it that way. Right. And so that's the difference. Being in an emotionally mature relationship, communication is polite, it's kind. There is still conflict sometimes, but there is repair. And so you feel valued. My partner or my, whoever I'm in a relationship with comes back and says, I didn't like how I handled that.
Right.
That feels good.
Right.
So they can be self-reflective.
Right.
They can vulnerably share their feelings. They know their own needs and preferences and ask for them. That's the key. Being willing to ask someone for what we need is vulnerable and it is mature. And that is a very difficult thing for most people because they haven't experienced that in their families of origin. But what happens is that they feel respected, that and I don't have to guess what it is that you need. And then I don't have to get in trouble if I didn't get it right.
Right.
You're responsible for you and what you need.
Right.
And I'm responsible for me and what I need.
Right.
So I can't get mad at you. That's
Right.
not fair for
Right.
me to get mad at you for not telling me that you needed something.
Right.
And
right.
so, yes, there's that mirroring, but we can't always figure it out. We don't
Right.
always know
Right.
what someone else needs. So we have to be able to be honest.
Right. Right.
So there's respect and boundaries. There's trust and just a general sense of security in the relationship. Like this feels good.
Yeah.
It's that we trust that our partner is going, like, they have their own, they're not dependent on me to feel good.
Yeah, I think that's a big one right there.
Yeah, that's huge.
That's
they have their own coping mechanisms.
Right, right.
They have hobbies, they exercise, they ask for help. They don't need me to anticipate their needs and be responsible for them all the time.
Right.
And it's not fair to ask another person to hold you up.
Right.
We can't live out our purpose if we are holding up another person all the time.
Right.
So yeah, so those are some of the differences.
So talk to all the single ladies, talk to them. And how could you spot an emotionally immature person, like on a first date?
Yeah, right. I'm sure, all of us want to go back and wish that we had learned this stuff long ago. And I tell my teens this, all my teen daughters this all the time. It's like, they're like, okay, mom,
we
just
get
stop.
it.
But
yeah,
totally. But hopefully there's someone out there that wants to hear this. So, okay. So if you're out on a first date and they are talking a lot about themselves, this is kind of a flag. Do they listen to you? Are they curious about you? Do you feel cared about in this interaction? So you can look at like their interactions with others on the date. Like, for example, a waiter, say you're at a restaurant. Are they impatient? Are they irritable? Do they complain? Do you have a sense that they think this waiter is a real person, or is he just someone that works for them? They tend to have a very strong reaction to small things. So if something's wrong on their plate, that's going to be a big deal.
Right.
You're going to hear themes of blame when they talk about others.
I think that's a big one.
Yeah. So that victim mentality, like their ex was just crazy, or, they have this like horrible boss. It's just it's always someone else, especially when talking about like an ex relationship, though. I think that's important. Right. Every relationship is two-sided. We all have our own piece of what went wrong.
Yeah.
It's not fair to just make it, all about the other person.
Right.
And then lastly, do they respond to boundaries? Or do they keep pushing their agenda when I'm telling them what I want?
Oh, that is such a pet peeve of mine.
Yeah.
That's like awful. A big, I'm married now, but in friendship, if somebody doesn't respect boundaries, I will love them. I'll respect them. I'll be kind to them, but I'm not going to get close. I mean, and
Right.
as a former person that put people first before God,
Mm-hmm.
I that is something to me, just like an alcoholic doesn't need to go to a
Mm-hmm.
bar. I don't need to be friends with people like that. Close
Right. It's
friends.
dangerous.
Yeah, it's
No.
dangerous. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Unless you're really confident in your ability to
mhm.
assert your boundaries, and you just shouldn't need to do that
Right. Right.
in a healthy relationship.
And I think that with these people, it's not that then we say they're awful and we're not going to, you
No.
know, love them, but there's an awareness, right? That
Mm-hmm.
you bring to that. And again, the goal is when you're getting like in your close connections, they need to be interdependent so that you have the freedom to put God first,
Mm-hmm.
and to live and be who He's created you to be. So why would a person? Because if somebody's sitting with you, and I want to like unpack. Okay, if they're blaming others, I love what you said too, especially about a past relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't respect boundaries and they don't listen to you because it's all
Mm-hmm.
about them. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I know you said other things, but so you just remember boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
blaming, all
Mm-hmm.
about them. So then
Right.
that's how you can.
Why would we?
Yeah.
Why would we get involved with a person like that?
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
it's a really good
Yeah.
question. So like I said before, they're not all bad. No one's all bad. And so they have really good traits. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
they can be very charismatic, very
Mm-hmm.
confident. They can present
Mm-hmm.
themselves in such a way that, they're assertive. They know what they're doing. They know what they're talking about. That feels good sometimes to be
Mm-hmm.
around someone who
Mm-hmm.
can make decisions
Mm-hmm.
easily. Um, Also, I think that we are curious about someone that's so self-involved.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a curiosity that a lot of us have. It's like, this person's interesting. They've got this whole like life going on, and I'm just it's drawing me in. I want to know more about them because there's a lot
Mm-hmm.
to them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so because they're telling you all about themselves, so
Mm-hmm.
there's curiosity. But I think I remember one of your podcasts a while back. I think it was Carrie McAvoy
Mm-hmm.
was,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know, I might get this wrong, but I think she was talking about the traits of a person that gets involved with a narcissist.
Mm-hmm.
And she was citing some research on that.
Mm-hmm.
And if I remember correctly, the two traits that they found that would likely lead a person to choose a narcissistic partner were agreeableness
Mm-hmm.
and conscientiousness.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, you know, thinking about those, if we're a conscientious person, we sense that that person is broken in some way, and we're a kind-hearted person, and so that kind of draws us in. It's like we see a vulnerability in them. We see beyond the self-centeredness, and when we're curious, we want to know more.
Right.
And so, I think we could just leave it there, but I think that we would be robbing ourselves of deeper healing if we didn't look at our earlier relationships.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so, were we born agreeable and conscientious? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
maybe there's temperaments,
Mm-hmm.
but for some people, we have had experiences with our families of origin that where we had an emotionally immature parent, and in that relationship we learned to put others first.
Right. Right.
We learned to caretake
Right.
instead of being cared for.
Right.
So this role feels familiar,
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, adult children of EIPs are just used to allowing someone to be
Mm-hmm.
the most important person in the room.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They've already internalized the belief that they are subpar, that
Mm-hmm.
something is wrong with them because they've basically been treated this way their whole life, they aren't as important as everyone else. And so they don't expect to be heard or seen.
Right.
It's okay that this person has this big personality or is taking up so much room, because they may not want to be seen. Maybe they don't like what's inside. Someone's told them that it's bad. They don't, in their minds, like, it would be selfish to think of themselves as important. So let me give myself to listening to this person. So it becomes very normal to orbit around the dominant person and expect emotional loneliness and invalidation.
Right, because that's what they've experienced. So they've never attempted to have the confidence or to be or to blossom or all those things, because this is the way it's always been. And so challenging that can be scary. But then if you see this really charismatic, smart, person, then it's like, oh, this would be a good planet for me to orbit around. So let me, I'm not going to be exciting because I can't be, but this person is. So let me orbit around them. Yeah.
It feels safe.
It feels safe.
It feels safe and familiar.
Okay. Okay.
I can't trust myself, but I think I could trust him. He could lead.
Right. These are all like such great thoughts. And as you're talking, Holly, I'm just thinking through so many women that I talk to in Treasured Ministries who are young things like me. No. But we get to this place in life and it's like, I don't really know what I like or where, who I am, because they've spent their lives, orbiting because of getting, involved in, maybe being raised in, and then carrying that over into a relationship with an emotionally immature person. So, and what we're going to be talking about in our podcast in part 2 is how this impacts you. If you're already in a relationship, you have a parent, or you feel like you've listened today and you're like, you know what, the dating is over, I'm married to this person now, what kind of impact does that have on your life? And I think this is really going to be a blessing to you, one, because you're going to understand that it's not your fault. And as we're going to unfold in this podcast series, there are things that you can do, which will allow you to blossom, which is wonderful, because that's what God wants us to do. Holly, do you have any closing thoughts that you want to say?
Just that, I've been there, and if anyone out there is feeling like, oh, I did this, I'm doing this just feels like I don't know how I can get out of this mess. It is certainly possible, and the first step is just being aware and educating yourself on some of these things and just trying to see it from a different perspective. And just kind of putting those old thoughts and beliefs aside long enough to just try to take this in, even though it's new and different, and just kind of let it marinate, sit with you. And I think that, eventually you'll get it and you'll start making these changes for yourself.
I love that, because, it's hard to confront what you don't know you need to confront. And so really awareness is the first step. And so if through this podcast you've become aware, join us next week as we talk about how an EIP, an emotionally immature parent or spouse, impacts our lives. Thanks so much for listening in, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.